Hi, and welcome to the Dr. Shelley Meyer YouTube channel and the Women in Medicine Be the Change podcast. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Randy Schachter. And we are going to talk about her experience in medicine, what brought her to her unique path that she's doing right now, and just hear about how she's using creativity and her true love and passion for things and how she's incorporating into that, helping other women. So Randy, do you want to go by Randy or Dr.?
Randy's fine. Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Randy, welcome to the channel and the podcast. I'd like you to tell us about how you got to where you are now and kind of what shaped your path.
I've always loved to listen to people tell me stories. Mm-hmm. And wherever I went, it seemed that people like to tell me stories. So I started out as a psych major. I thought I was going to do therapy. I was at UCLA, and somewhere along the way in that plan, I felt like, well, I wanted more tools. What if they needed more beyond just talking? And so I decided I wanted to go to med school and intimidated, but I did it anyway. My dad was a doctor. He was really, really smart. I didn't think I was as smart as he was. But a friend of mine who was a year ahead was in med school and convinced me that regular people can do it. So I said, okay, I'm going to try. Mm-hmm. And I got in. So I went to med school and regular people can do it.
Yes, they can. I'm a regular person also. Where'd you go to med school?
I went to NYCOM, New York College of Osteopathic Medicine at NYIT.
Yeah, I went to the osteopathic school in Kansas City.
Great school. I hear good things about Kansas.
Yeah, it's a good school. All right. Well, then you are doing some really cool stuff now. How did you get from there to here?
So I ended up practicing psychiatry, which is basically the same concept of, adding more tools. And I always wanted to work with kids. And then as I worked with kids over the years, what I realized was that if I can help women, the moms, then I can also indirectly help the children. The healthier the mom is, then the healthier the kids are. Like if we look at studies of mom and kids in depression, often the phases go with the wellness of their parents as well. And so as I got older, my comfort level of working with women improved too, and my desire to do that. So I basically treat women and children. And so I have a private practice where I treat women and children. And then in the past couple of years, I started a program where I run groups for medical professional women to manage stress, anxiety, and burnout. And that happened because of so many reasons.
Right. It's hard to wrap it up into one little story.
Basically, I have my own experiences with burnout and keeping it at bay over the years and what I use as tools. Mm-hmm. So I learned from my dad very young that you need to have tools to navigate the stress of managing patients in life. He used Tai Chi and carpentry.
Awesome.
And so for me, it is pottery, cooking, and meditation. And so at some point I decided, so over the years, this has been helpful for me and burnout has kind of ebbed and flowed. I also modify my practice to kind of navigate my burnout and keep it at bay.
Great.
So when I feel like things are too stressful, I will stop taking patients. When I think that I don't have the capacity to handle the emotional toll of patients, I will slow down the caseload, even if there is space.
Right.
But the space is then used for other things to keep the noise from kind of taking over.
Right.
And some people don't do it that way, but that's what I need to do to kind of keep me present and capable with the patients that I do have. My belief is that if I can't be present with the patient I have, then I shouldn't be adding more.
I totally agree. And that's how I've managed my own practice too. Tell me about some of the situations because we all have our stories, right? The situations that you've been in where you felt like this is not what I want to do, not what I want to practice. This is not the best way to establish a healing relationship with the patient. like some of the jobs that have
right.
not
a couple things happened. So one, I worked at a hospital, and when we first started, call was like 4 hours a day on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that I left, it was like 12 hours, sometimes 16. Charlotte grew very fast. It's a very fast-paced growing city. And as people move here, it also means that so does their mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so they tried to get help with coverage, but it didn't really happen. We were supposed to have call every 6th. It was often every 4th because they couldn't recruit fast enough. And then I had, petitioned for a while to have a late Monday where I worked 3 hours later. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I would leave an hour earlier. And it worked really great for my patients who then didn't have to miss school, or the parents didn't have to miss work. Mm-hmm. And then it allowed me to be home when my kids got home from school or close to it. And so I like to practice what I preach. If I'm treating kids and their parents and saying, please be present for your kids, I want to be home and present for my own kids. What's the point of having them if you can't be with them?
Exactly.
And so it was great. And it went really well for a year or so. Patients loved it. I loved it. Staff just seemed to be fine with it. One staff stayed later with me and they got to leave early the next couple of days too. So I went away on maternity leave, and then I had some complications. Here's another issue that was stressful with my job, is that I had bleeding during pregnancy and I needed to be on bed rest, and it didn't seem to be received well, even though there was a medical letter like, what do you mean you can't work? I'm like, this isn't my fault.
Right. I'm not choosing to do this.
Right. Yeah. I had like a CSV and there was complications at CVS or whatever it's called. I can't remember. It's that chronic villus sampling. Yeah, CVS.
Yeah, CVS.
And I couldn't help it. And so they were a little bit annoyed. And, I can understand that you had trouble with getting coverage, and that's annoying, but you don't take it out on the pregnant lady. You just figure it out. That was lame.
Yeah.
But that was the office manager, and she just seemed, I don't know, maybe it was her own baby issues. I can't answer that question. Didn't like the feeling.
Right.
And then, so when I got back from maternity leave, they had decided that they were doing away with the evening issue.
Without even asking you, just did it themselves, right?
Right. Nope. They decided they no longer thought it was a good idea or viable or benefit. And clearly it was a benefit to the patients, and clearly it was a benefit to me. And now I have a brand new baby, which makes it even more important to me. What are you doing? So I worked for a couple more months, and then and call was even worse. And my baby was having issues, and I just felt not supported, not cared about. They wanted to move I was very strict that I had 30 minutes with patients, and they wanted to move that to 20. New patients were an hour, and they wanted to make it 45 for child and adolescent psychiatry.
Psychiatry, right?
Quality,
that's right.
That's not realistic,
right?
And or authentic or engaging, or it's none of those things. Exactly. I do therapy with my patients. They let me do therapy with a handful of choice patients, but it wasn't allowed on a consistent basis. Mm-hmm. They let me. That is not how I wanted to practice. After all of this effort in medicine, was being told what I was allowed to do or not allowed to do for the benefit of my patients. So I said, no, thank you. I'm done. It was not healthy for them. It was not healthy for me. And I left.
Mm-hmm. Good. And then did you start your own practice?
I did.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. You said that.
So then I took this very, very scary leap.
Yes, it is
really scared, but scared, and did it anyway. So my dad had a private practice, and he was very happy. I looked into joining other people, and then I decided no, because then I need to negotiate. Oh, do we want to use this phone? Do we want to get this EMR? Do we want to blah, blah, blah? No, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask permission if I can go on vacation. Yes. I want my own. And my dad had his own, and he figured it out on his own. I can do this. You know, I was used to think that my dad was this amazing man. I still think he is. Mm-hmm. Bigger than life. Yeah. And that I couldn't do what he could do. So I was afraid. But then I went to med school and he did that. And so then I thought, I couldn't open a private practice, but he did it. So why couldn't I? Yes. And I did. And so what I realized is that he's really, really great. And I can do it too. If he, humans
you got past those limiting beliefs and you're like,
correct. Yes, exactly. And so I always knew I was going to open my own practice. And this is one of the things I always tell people. Mm-hmm. When I was in residency, every single private practice supervisor that I had, I would get all of their notes, like what kind of forms did you use? What was your pricing? How did you pick your patients? What was your screening? Instead of just the supervision about like therapy and med management, it was always asking about their office model. I don't think all residents bothered to do that, but I culled everything and kept them in folders. So when I went into private practice, I basically picked through all of them and then created my own forms. Like, I like that questionnaire. I like this format. This was the heading I was going to use. Yeah. And then created my own. And actually, I think there's like a handful of practices in this city that have started their own, like have left since I left that hospital. And they use my forms, but with their letterhead on top because they're good.
Awesome. So now you're allowed to practice psychiatry. You're allowed to practice therapy and counseling with patients. And that's always, as a family practice doctor, referring out to psychiatry. And I remember when I first started my own practice and hearing, well, my psychiatrist just manages my medications. That's all?
Right. What's the point of that?
Yeah. So I was pretty shocked, and now I'm used to it because it is the norm, right? Isn't it the norm now that it's
I think it is more common.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad
I think it's only because the hospitals and the insurance companies force them to.
Right. It's all about the RVUs and the volume and all of that. It's the same across all specialties. We're all feeling it. Well, let's flip sides here and tell us about the retreats you're doing, the courses you're doing, all the fun stuff you're combining that has your passions in it and helps other women, really ignite their passion as well.
So I run these programs for medical women professionals where they can eat yummy farm to table food. Each session is like a different area, region, country.
Wow.
And Matthews Farmers Market is a local farmers market. It's lovely. And then I have this community sustaining agriculture. It's you pay a share into the farm, and then the farm gives you a share of whatever they produce for that season. Every week we get yummy fresh vegetables and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And then typically we read a journal article beforehand and we kind of go over it. The article is usually either related to mindfulness or CBT or benefits of art and therapy, or what is burnout, what is secondary trauma, what are the different symptoms that you might like, familiarizing with what you might be feeling, understanding what these things may be helpful for. Where do you fit in this, and does it resonate? And some of them are stories of like different experiences or how somebody might present if they were secondary traumatized, like the shift in personality style.
Awesome.
So that we learn from others to know where do we fit in that process. Like, is this happening to me? No, I'm not there yet, but I'm over here and I don't want to go there. So what do I need to do? And then after we eat and we chat and there's a lot of laughter, which is really important and so very healing. And very funny. Then we make pottery. So I teach them a technique and every week it's a different technique. Sometimes it's going into the yard and picking herbs from the garden. And then we kind of put them into a plate so that you can have like imprints of nature into your platter, or we'll make a mug or something. And then they After we're done making the pottery, we'll do some form of meditation, CBT or mindfulness, and I'll teach them that skill. And then we have dessert. And then they go home. And then by the end of the course, they have a handful of pieces that they've made themselves. I have a kiln, they bisque fire it, then they come back and they paint it or they glaze it. Mm-hmm. And so either it's gifts for themselves to remember forever or gifts that they give away. And one of the things that are important is that they learn how to be mindful of the pottery that they do. So in one session, they get these 2 little round discs. One is bisqued and one is not, and they paint on each of them. And the concept is to actually notice the difference in texture, the difference in absorption, the slight differences in how these techniques vary because one is cooked and the other is raw. And so in everything that they do, the goal is for them to notice the slight changes or differences. So even when we eat the food, like the reason that every meal is fresh, preservative free and farm to table, but from a different region is because I want to expose them to all kinds of flavors and smells and colors that they may not be familiar with or is alien to their culture so that they can kind of promote shifts in their palate and awareness that maybe they didn't have before, and then be like, oh, this invokes some memory from this blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And it brings feelings and things up that might be wonderful. Or if not, then they can discuss that vulnerable, oh my God, I had this when I was on call, and this they used to call this chicken and paima or blah, blah, whatever memory
it brings up.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so great because it's incorporating the meditative aspect of the pottery, the text, the mindfulness. You're bringing mindfulness Absolutely. Into the food. Mindful eating is so important to learn.
And we do pottery on yoga balls because that's how I do my pottery. So they're actually having to be aware of their posture and where they sit as they do their work. And sometimes we do it outside in the garden and sometimes we do it inside, depends on what the weather permits. There's lighting outside and stuff if it's nightfall, and we can meditate in the under the stars.
Wow. How
so
beautiful.
Next week, I have a retreat that I'm co-hosting with 2 other doctors in Charlotte, and we have about 28 physicians coming. And the beauty of it isn't just, so there's no pottery there. It is a rest, restore, reset. There will be yoga in the morning, yoga in the afternoon. There will be a meditation. There will be a keynote speaker that's talking about sleep. That's Nancy Behrens, and she's lovely. She's the director of sleep medicine at Novant, which is the local hospital.
Awesome.
There will be a nutritionist talking about kind of like how to find healthy snacks and nutrition for the busy doc, like make sure you're anchoring at least while we're running, because that's what we do. But even if we're not running on empty, we should not run on empty, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't be running, but if we're running, try this to make it less dangerous, I think is the idea. And
Great.
then a little bit about kind of finding what your core values are and how to kind of keep integrity while all these moving parts are trying to kind of shift from who we are, right? We have all these demands from corporations and things telling us, but how do we kind of hold the line and keep your integrity in what the core values are, and where do you shift to kind of maintain that? And then another one is kind of life hacks and how to do things in a way that cuts time and mind space so that you can get stuff done and move forward.
Wow, that's all so important.
And then the fun part for that retreat is that we basically canvassed the town and said, these doctors are tired and they had been working their butts off and they need to be celebrated. Help us. And so we have like spas, donations, and so many people have like sponsored little stuff for like to put in the swag bag and to raffle off like from the local community, that they will totally feel loved and cared for by this community.
That's amazing. And so are you finding that, well, so I know for your live and 8-week course, it's doctors in your area. Are people coming in from other areas, or is it
So
North Carolina?
we did it for this retreat. We really made it specifically for the local Charlotte docs so that they can kind of find their local community too.
Awesome.
I think we at some point we may make it larger, but it was just find your BFF next door kind of deal.
Well, then for those physicians, women physicians that might be listening, how can they learn more about what you're doing locally there in North Carolina?
So my website is silverspaces.org. And that's the way to find me. But my next step is to be global. I plan to do a retreat in Portugal in the coming year, and that is not local. And that would be an 8-day. Imagine my program is eight sessions. It would be 8 days, but it would be condensed. We would do pottery, meditation in the morning, yoga at, sunset.
Oh, awesome.
Pottery in the morning, and then do excursions on a few days on your own, teach a cooking class, have farm to table chefs cook for us, swim in the pool on the rooftop.
Nice.
Go on a wine tour, go island hopping.
How fun. Yeah, I think hopefully our viewers and listeners will really want to join you on that. So you'll have that on your website eventually when you
get
once that
I
more ironed out. Right. Yep. I know for I'm not sure if it was your 8-week course or your retreat, there's CME. Is that correct?
All of them have CME.
Wow. Yes. And so you do metrics too, measuring
I measure before and after with the Copenhagen and a Pro QOL and clinical change.
Right. You've
definitely
seen progress.
The needle moves.
Great.
Clinically significant was the term. Yes. The needle definitely moves. There is so much benefit. And then the CME for the 8-week is 14. So it's like a 2.5 hour each time, and you get 14 CME.
Wow. That's a decent amount of CME. That's really good. That's a lot of CME. That's good. Yeah. I'm sorry, for the what were you going to say?
I haven't figured out what the retreat. So the retreat that we're doing now is 8 CME in a week, but I haven't figured out what the Portugal 8-day would be. I'm assuming it would be something like 14, because I think that we would do some in the morning and then free time in the afternoon.
That's amazing. Well, everybody check out Dr. Randy's website to learn more about that. And then if you could share for those who can't maybe attend, the local things that you're doing, what do you think are some good self-care things to keep in mind for women that are struggling with their burnout?
I think that finding something that you are finding creativity, right? Find something that you enjoy doing. For many people, something 3-dimensional can be more engaging than 2-dimensional, but there are people that are drawers that can zoom in and find flow, and they don't need the 3-dimension process. If you're struggling with how to meditate, it's not really just emptying your mind. Like, that's just a myth that I've never
not sitting there quiet.
The only time my mind is empty is when I'm doing pottery. Pottery allows my mind to but actually sitting and meditating, it's impossible. And my mind wanders like crazy. And that's perfectly okay. Like, that idea that mind should not wander is a fallacy.
I agree.
I'm sure the best meditator in the world still has a wandering mind. It's recognizing that it wanders and bringing it back. So really, if you're not familiar with meditating, then find an app that's going to introduce you to it and start there, and only do it for a couple minutes. Don't do a 50-minute meditation the first time. Do a 5-minute one and just get a feel for it, and don't be afraid. And guided is easiest at the beginning.
I totally agree.
And Insight Timer is my favorite place to find them, because there's like gazillions and different voices and different styles, and you can pick the duration and you can pick the type. And that's where I would say to find if you want to try something new like that. But creativity and meditation are such great tools to kind of give your brain a break for a little while from all the clutter. And it needs a break.
I agree. I mean, I talk to so many, especially patients, but also other professional women, everything they say exercise is their self-care, which is great. And it is one of my pieces, but I think you have to have that mindfulness piece in there too. You could incorporate that with exercise. You can incorporate it with activity, but I think having that quieting and that focusing is really important.
Absolutely. After your yoga, do your yoga nidra.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this has been such a great discussion. I've really enjoyed it. Randy, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your story and sharing your passions. I love what you're doing, and I hope everybody else out there can learn from it and enjoy it. And I hope your retreat goes well. And just thanks so much for sharing your story. It's just
my
an
pleasure.
awesome story.
It was lovely to be here. Thank you, Dr. Shelley.
Hope you enjoyed that episode and podcast with Dr. Randy Schachter. It was so fun to learn about her using mindfulness for pottery and cooking and courses, and everything she's doing sounds amazing. And just to hear their psychiatry perspective on the current state of medicine as well, and burnout in women. So if you enjoyed that, I really encourage you to support my mission here on helping women in medicine reclaim their mental and physical health and rediscover their love for medicine. If you want to support, you can like, subscribe, and share this video out. Hit the button to be notified when I post a new video every Friday. If you're listening to this on the podcast, if you could share a review on your favorite podcast platform, that would help the podcast grow. And if you want to join us on Patreon, we'll have a private group there for women physicians. If you want to support the mission, you can find out more about my Patreon campaign in the description or in the show notes, and I'll put a link on the screen as well. So thanks so much for joining me. We'll see you in the next episode.